Hi, this is Nancy L.T. Hamilton with Tip of the Day, and today we're going to talk one more time about solder, and then I promise I won't mention it again. Today I want to cover solder, what is it, and how you use the different types of it. I know there's some confusion with people, you know, when do I use hard solder, when do I use easy solder, and today we'll talk about that. The first thing is that there are two different types of solder. One is called soft solder, and that's this form where you use a low melting solder with a soldering iron. This is generally used for stained glass or mechanical operations, or you know, doing circuit board work. I know some people do make jewelry with this. If you do, make sure you get the lead-free silver kind. Don't just buy any kind of the soft solder because you can injure your customers. And the other kind of solder that I use is the silver solder and gold solder, which is called hard soldering, not to be confused with hard solder, which is a different classification, but it's hard solder is what it's called when you use a torch and you melt at high temps. The silver solder melts, I think it's 1450 down to 12 something. So it's a substantially higher temperature than is used with the soft soldering. Within this group of hard solder, it comes in the IT, which we discussed, which is eutectic solder used for enameling, and it's melted at a very high temperature, and it's also composed of two pure elements, silver and copper. There's no zinc in this, which makes it a little high temp for using with regular soldering operations. Generally though, we use a hard solder, a medium, an easy, and something I don't have here, which is an extra easy. And those are used for general soldering operations. This type of solder comes in a wire form, it comes in a sheet form like this, and the one I don't have also is a paste form, which I really don't use. I didn't get trained with it and I'm not used to it, so a lot of people love it. It comes in a syringe and or little containers, and it's goopy, you know, you scoop it out. I like this kind. I just don't know. I haven't played with the other yet, so maybe someday I'll love it. So anyway, what I wanted to do briefly was show you how you cut pallions from sheet. You get your little shears. These are called French shop shears, and what you need to do is cut little snippets like a fringe along the base of the solder. And then, can you see that? So you make a little fringe like this. And then I'm going to put my finger over the bottom of this. I'm going to come in and cut off little pallions, that's what these little chunks are called, off the bottom. I don't know, can you see those little guys? Maybe I'll put them up here on the block. Now the longer you cut these fringe, the more solder chips you can cut at a time, or pallions. You can also buy them pre-cut through some of the suppliers, so you don't have to cut them yourself. But the nice thing about cutting them yourself is you can make them as small as you need, because you always want to use the bare amount of solder that you can get by with. Now if you use the wire version of solder like I do, I flatten it out in my rolling mill to make it really thin so that I can use really a little bit, because this wire is a little thick. And you have to cut teeny little pallions out of it, and it's also a little harder to cut because it's thick. So I roll them out. If you don't have a rolling mill, I'll make a little noise here and probably send these flying. And you can just hammer it out with a hammer. Ow! Or hammer your finger, which I do often. And just go ahead and flatten it out with a hammer like you would working with any other metal. And then what I do if I want a really tiny piece of solder is I'll cut this up the middle, like that, bend that curl down, and the same concept, I put my finger at the end here and cut little pallions. Since this is so thin and I'm cutting really small pieces, these are great for jump rings, these little teeny pieces, so it's not covered with solder. The solder is a slightly different color than the silver you're using. The higher the solder, like a hard solder, it's got a higher content of silver in it, so it's going to match your metal more. The extra easy solder has a lot more zinc in it, so it's got a yellow cast to it. So with a silver piece, you can really tell you can see the solder line a lot more clearly. So it's best to use the Extra Easy only for like repairs on something or on a piece that's really, really fine. Sometimes findings I'll use the Extra Easy solder on. So what I like to do is to use the hard solder for my first solder join on a piece. On this particular bracelet, I soldered these half round wires on first onto the flat sheet before I bent it. So I used hard solder. Then my next join, I used medium solder, which I believe was this front piece on here. That was sweat soldered with the medium. And then I used, also used the medium on my hinge because I wanted the strength. Easy solder isn't as strong as medium. Medium's a great solder for all around soldering applications. Even if you just have one solder joint, I'd do it in medium. And then easy solder I used for soldering my, there's a bug, sorry, being attacked. Use it to solder on your settings. One of the reasons you would use easy on here is you need a lower temperature to solder it, the solder, melt the easy solder, so you have less chance of melting the fine prongs on a setting. So basically with solder, you're going to, if you're doing one or two joins, use medium. If you're going to do a complex piece, start with the hard and work your way down to the easy solder. So that's why you use different kinds of solder. Try to stay away from the Extra Easy if possible and use the IT for enameling. So one or two more things. One I want to talk about is this is gold-filled solder, which is pretty cool. I think it only comes in one. I think it's hard. I think it's the only way. But a lot of people, when they have sheet, they don't know how to mark them. And here's a really cool way to do it, is to take a letter punch. This one, since I know this is hard, I'm going to take the H and I'm going to stamp it. And then I don't know if you can see it, it's pretty tiny. But now every time I pick this up, I'll see the H and I'll know that it's hard. Yeah, I didn't think I could see it. It's pretty tough. And this one is already stamped with an H because I know that this silver sheet is hard. You can also use 2 dots or make an X for hard, but be consistent and write it down. You know, 2X, 1X for hard, 2 for medium, 3 for easy, something like that. But set up your system and be consistent with it, and then you'll always know what type of solder you have. See our previous video for talking about the solder bends on the wire. And I think that's it for our talk about solder. Next video will be equally as exciting. This is Nancy LT Hamilton. Thanks for coming to my studio. Bye.